Hey everyone, welcome to episode 69 of the Frasers podcast. In this episode, I talk to Pete Fraser from Harbour Lights in Falmouth and Frasers Fish and Chips in Penzance. I've known Pete for a good few years now. He's not really your typical fish and chip shop owner. He definitely isn't at the coalface type of operator, but that's not to say he doesn't run a slick operation. It's actually quite the opposite. When we were chatting before hitting the record button, Pete mentioned how happy he was with the NFFF, especially over the recent times with COVID and so on, and he wanted to call it out in the podcast. But we got chatting and it just got missed because we thought we dealt with it because we mentioned it before. So I just wanted to take this time and just reiterate Pete's thoughts on the matter and how pleased he is with the NFFF. Now's a great time to visit our website because we've been uploading lots of how-to guides, lots of recipes, guides on managing your oils, cleaning your range, making better fish and chips in general. We really appreciate all the feedback and I'm glad that they're helpful. I absolutely love writing the how-to guides and the insight articles. However, if you want more help, maybe more of a hands-on approach, maybe you should consider booking a training course at the NFFF or KFE school. Especially post-COVID, it could be a great way to not only sharpen your skills, but a good way to support both schools. Pete did mention that if anyone out there would like advice or mentoring, get in touch with him at pete@harbourlights.co.uk. His email address will also be in the show notes. Anyway, thanks for listening to me. I hope you enjoy this episode with Pete Fraser. Peter, welcome to the Frasers podcast.
Thank you very much for the invite.
No, it's nothing at all, mate. You know, we talk all the time, and I know you listen to the podcasts, and I thought, well, you know, we've got to do it at some point, haven't we?
Yeah, well, no, I love chatting to friends, and so this opportunity was great. So thanks, Nels.
Fantastic. So, you know, for those that don't know you're Pete Fraser from Harbour Lights Harbour Lights in Falmouth and Frasers in Penzance. So that's two very successful sites. You know, we've known each other, I'd say 5-6 years or so, give or take.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I wanted to get you on because I think in some ways you're quite, I like to talk to people that have got a different perspective sometimes. And I find that, you know, your experience of coming into this industry, when you was a bit more middle-aged, let's say, you'd had experience elsewhere. So tell us a little bit about how you got into the fish and chip trade.
Well, the first bit of my life was sort of conveyor belt. Kids didn't go on gap years or anything. So I put my nose down, got my A-levels, went off to university in Swansea, ended up with a maths degree. And I wanted to work. I wanted to go to a city, but I didn't want to go to London. So I centred in on Liverpool, where I had some family connections and worked in the really early days of the computer industry. And it was good, but I was rapidly developing into a real slob. Average lunchtimes were like 3 or 4 pints. And I remember at the time, it was in about 1982, and the Falklands War was on. And I was in the pub at lunchtime, dressed like Rodney Bewes in a 3-piece suit, just cheering on, oh, God, boys, you know, it was like watching a game of football. And I got back and my office, it was a big open plan office, looked down on the Mersey and a Royal Naval warship came up the river. And I just suddenly thought, what am I doing being a spectator in the pub cheering these guys on? Why don't I do something completely different and join the Navy? Okay. And so the next day I went down to the careers office and originally I said, can I be a Royal Marine officer? And they laughed at me and they made me do some press ups and chin ups and things. And I was quite fit. I was playing quite a lot of rugby, but they then asked me the killer question, and he said, "Pete, how much? You're 23. I was nearly 24. How many nights under canvas have you spent in your life?" And I counted them up, and it was one. And they said, "You're not the sort for Royal Marines." And then they painted a picture. Do you want to be in a ditch for 2 or 3 weeks with rations running low, or would you prefer to be on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier at a cocktail party in Barbados? Which one sort of sits better with you? And I went, "Oh, I think I'll go for the cocktail party in Barbados." And just how life happens, within 2 years, I was at that cocktail party on the flight deck in Barbados.
Oh, really?
And so, yeah, it was great. I then charged into 19 years in the Navy. I've got very little coordination, but I suppose I've got a little bit of a brain. So they put me in the back of rapidly seeking helicopters with lots of weapon systems, hunting Russian submarines. Great fun, lots of sort of boys' own type stuff. But I'd found the girl that I wanted to marry. Kids were popping out regularly, got 4 now, and I was sort of approaching 40 years old and a bit more, and I thought, time for a change. So I did an open university course, and none of it, and it was just an OU course on business, and none of it made any sense whatsoever because I've been in the armed forces. So me and my mate opened the local paper and said, "Shall we buy a business to help us with our homework?" And my finger went over the paper, and it could have landed on a hair salon, it could have landed on a taxi company, but it landed on the Harbour Lights in Falmouth. And
Wow.
At the time, I wasn't brave enough to buy it on my own. So my best mate in the Navy and I bought Harbour Lights and to help us with our homework. And little did I know that I'd stumbled across the friendliest industry in the world, and I was about to have lots of fun. Had to learn a lot, but that's how I ended up in the fish and chip industry at about 40.
It wasn't a small shop to get, though, was it? It's a bit of a monster, really, isn't it?
It is. That's why I don't think I was brave enough on my own. And it's for anyone that hasn't been to Harbour Lights, it's in a real sort of beautiful situation hanging over Falmouth Harbour. And Falmouth Harbour has got big naval ships in, it's got cruise liners, it's got little fishing boats and yachts and things. There's always something to look at. And our restaurant looks 100-seater restaurant looks over Falmouth Harbour. But it didn't have the best of reputations, but it had a great location, which was something I picked up on my little business course. So within a couple of months, being in business was a lot more fun than sitting in a classroom learning about business. So I've been the OU course and sort of dived in into the very early days. Yeah. And
so give us an example. Yes. No, so I was going to say, give us an example of some of your early challenges. You're a new owner, new industry, you've just left the Navy. What would have been in those days the struggles?
I mean, 2-poo rules were in force. So buying a business, I had the workforce at the time. And I think because the shop didn't have the best of reputations, anyone that, it was sort of volunteers to work at Harbour Lights. It wasn't maybe the best of the best. So, but I was totally green in the gills. So I suppose I had people telling me how to do things that I knew was wrong, but I just didn't have enough experience to start off with. So it was, people were trying to pull the wool over my eyes and I didn't have the experience. But then I stumbled on an amazing bit of luck in that I live in a town called Helston, which is 12 miles away from Falmouth. The nearest chip shop to my house, I love asking for help. So I just strolled in there and I didn't know the guy. And I said, "Hi, my name's Pete. I'm leaving the Navy. I've just bought a chip shop in Falmouth. Haven't got a clue what I'm doing. Any chance of some help? Little did I know that I'd walked into a shop, Hutchinson's. Dave Hutchinson, sadly passed on now, was a previous fish and chip shop of the winner in around 95, I think. And he was at the top of his game. And he was also really friendly. And he said, yeah, sure, Pete. And so for the next, as long as I needed him, he was there helping me along the way. And I suppose now that I'm sort of 20 years in the business, my desire to try and help other people that want a bit of help is immense, because I just owe so much gratitude to the early days when I literally knew nothing. Although, sorry, I did go on the NFFF course, and there was a lot of, I don't think they'd ever had a Royal Naval officer before. And most of my colleagues, when they went on resettlement courses, were off to sort of finance in the city and things like this. And when I went in to say, what resettlement course would you like? I want to learn to open a fish and chip shop. So I got some funny looks, but what a brilliant course. Absolutely. And the nightlife on a Monday night in Leeds was immense. So it was that. I remember we left, I found a friend quite quickly, and we left the club at 3 a.m. And I remember we were like, giggling away. We're frying at 8:30. We better go back for a couple of hours kip. It was great. But I learned so much and started to make some really good friends in the industry.
Well, one thing I want to pick up to pass out here is that you're a really optimistic person. Every time I've met you, whether that's just in business, I don't know, but you're always quite an optimistic person. You always think out the box a little bit. Do you think people were willing to help you because of your attitude, because you walked in and you wanted help and you were polite and eager and fresh? Because I do hear sometimes the flip side, not about you, but in general, that, I don't get any help. And I wonder if it's just the way that you approach it, the attitude.
A big smile definitely helps, and an admission that you know nothing, and speaking with sincerity. But it's totally wide throughout the industry. I about 5 or 6 years ago, my general manager at the time and kitchen manager, I said, let's go on a fish and chip road trip. And we did 13 or 14 shops in 3.5 days. That was a lot of fish and chips. And we were up through Yorkshire. We went as far as Newcastle, and then we went across the Pennines and into Lancashire or whatever. And I contacted everyone in advance to say, do you mind if I pop in? And everyone wanted to sort of keep us forever and feed us and whatever, except one shop. I won't say which shop it was. And, the owner had said, do not speak to this person, my shop was 350, 400 miles away, but this owner didn't want to share his secret, but he was 1 out of 14. The 13 just could not have done enough and wanted to share secret batter recipes, how they did everything, marketing secrets. So I just love the industry.
Well, the good thing about that is that clearly states that, that in your experience, and if others want help, just be positive, ask, be honest, and the majority of people will help. And obviously there is a minority that will say, nah, I'd rather not, but the majority will get stuck in and help. Most
definitely. And it even so, I'm pleased. When I first came in, I got told that everyone's very friendly except for shops in your own town. I found the complete opposite. When Rick Stein moved into Falmouth, I said, come on in, let's make it the fish and chip capital of the Southwest. And, we ran out of fish, they ran out of chips, and we just sort of helped each other over the years. Coming out of lockdown, my shop in Penzance, we were so much busier than I thought. And I had a call from the shop, we've run out of chip. And I thought, oh no, we cannot. A chip shop that runs out of potato and chips, we can't do that. So I phoned up a fish and chip shop in Penzance. I thought they were open, but they weren't even actually open. And I said to the guy, you wouldn't have any potatoes, would you? And he said, yeah, of course. And I sort of broke curfew because I've been confined to barracks, and you may ask me about that later. But I went over there. By the time I got to Penzance, he had flashed up his potato room and he'd chipped half a yellow tub of chips, and he said, here you go, Pete. And this guy was 200 yards from my shop, and I just thought, wow.
I suppose that's always an argument I've heard over the years. Back in the day when there was the Chippy Chat forum that Mark Petrus set up, there was a dedicated forum, and now it's Facebook. And I do hear a lot of, or read a lot of, why should I help him? He's that or her. They're down the road from me. And I think that situation can be what you make it. The fact is, you're already both there. No one's going to leave without considerable cost, or unless you want to buy each other out, then again, considerable cost. So you already know your competitors. So how about we just move past that and have some, a way to help each other without giving away all your secrets. And, I was brought up on, in the fish and chip business, and on our road, it's probably a mile. And it's no exaggeration to say there's 6 fish and chip shops on that road, and for the most part, it was either hate some or love some. And I think one of the chaps that I still talk to him now, my brother's got the shops now, but he's a nice guy who's got a shop up the road, and we do talk. And the others we don't know so well, so we don't talk. But I do feel that if you can get past those emotions, you could probably do better getting on with your local competitor. Like you say, you benefited, and it just sort of makes sense to have that nice rapport.
But there's a local village quite close to me in Cornwall that has 2 chip shops in. It is the cheapest fish and chips in the whole of Cornwall, because the 2 shops don't talk to each other. They just engage in price wars. What? It just makes zero sense to me.
It's just a race to the bottom, isn't it?
And it is.
And I think, I think one argument is, like, if we had Andrew Crook on the podcast with us right now, he would say, because I know Andrew quite well, but he would say, you've got to be careful, because if those 2 shops talk to each other and increase their prices at the same rate, it could be seen as, a competition thing, what is it? And anti-competitive practices. Yeah. However, I would argue that if those 2 shops got along and just charged normally instead of charging rock bottom prices, that wouldn't be a problem either, in my view.
Totally agree.
And at least everyone can make a living, because it's hard enough in this job working 60 plus hours a week. That's just physically, not mentally, and then doing it for dirt cheap. The only winner is the customer. Well, and the suppliers. So you mentioned that obviously with lockdown, you've been locked down more than most. You've been sort of shielding, I guess. Is that the correct term?
Yes. If I can explain, I've been married to Sue for 29 years, and we got 4 kids. Sadly, Sue last October got diagnosed with breast cancer. Before COVID, I loved the NHS because I just couldn't believe how well they were looking after her. And so she's been progressing through treatment of chemotherapy. She's had a couple of operations and radiotherapies next, but the chemotherapy knocked her immune system out. She was near the top of the list of the, 1.5 million people that got a letter saying you're extra vulnerable, sheltered. So it was all happening at once. So we were working through that, and the prognosis is so good at Sue, and it's brilliant. Her hair's growing back lovely now, and her confidence increases every day. So that's great. Then we superimposed COVID on that, and shutting a shop is relatively simple when you're stuck at home, but getting the 2 open again, I'm so grateful for the gang, our teams that managed to do it, with this idiot 60-year-old at the end of the phone saying, don't forget to do this, don't forget to do that. But both shops are rocking now, just running on takeaway only. Both of them have got restaurants. I've taken the decision, even though Cornwall's about to get mobbed, to not open our restaurants. We're just going to run takeaway. I'm saying goodbye to a lot of trade, but it's not fair on my team to operate our restaurants. It's all going to be too tight, going in and out of toilets, food going in and out. And at the end of the day, I'm really worried. I'm one of these people that are really worried about the hospitality industry. Someone comes in for a nice meal and they're served by someone in a face mask and rubber gloves standing a metre away from the table. It's, the clue's in the name hospitality, and we're turning more into, by opening restaurants too early, I think we're turning more into feeding stations than the hospitality. So luckily we've got takeaways. If I was restaurant only, I'd totally get it, but I've got the luxury of a takeaway. And so we're just trying to ramp up everything we can do to sort of get more output out of our takeaways. But I think until social distancing is sorted, I'm in no hurry to open the restaurants again.
Have you implemented anything like click and collect or deliveries to sort of help the takeaway? Or
yes, luckily, Harbour Lights was already beginning to move on click and collect. We were using Deliveroo, sort of fell out with Deliveroo. It just didn't work for us down in Falmouth. They kept on bringing people on push bikes, but Cornwall's built on hills and it was taking half an hour to get. They were quite happy to accept deliveries with someone on a push bike. Our fish and chips were being eaten half an hour after we'd sort of cooked it, and it was all going horribly wrong. So said goodbye to them. We now use local taxis, and that's worked really well. Very happy with that. Yes, and Penzance has followed on. So the online ordering's great.
So you're a numbers guy. You're very good with numbers. Did you find it difficult factoring in the Deliveroo margin to your menu? Because at 36%, you have to increase your prices by a fair bit. Say 70% ish, give or take. Was it achievable? Did you manage to do that?
We did. We increased our takeaway prices by, on average, about 21%. There wasn't any kickback to that. The Deliveroo, we negotiated 30%. Plus, they put the VAT on, but you can claim the VAT back. I mean, their bills are the most complicated things to work out. They're worse than your card machine bills. They are there to confuse you. There wasn't resistance to home deliveries, so it was about 21% up on takeaway, but it's working a lot better now. We've linked up with a local taxi, the biggest taxi company in both towns we operate in. They loved the trade. They were very happy to adopt our COVID health procedures that I'll probably want to mention about 18 times, but Chesterford Group, Hugh and James Lipscomb and Paul Goodgame, how they have helped the fish and chip industry over the last weeks is unbelievable. And what an interesting. But I mean, this started. My sort of love affair with those guys started about 10 years ago when I had a first attempt to buy a second shop. And I remember, I contacted the NFFF and I said, I'm going to 2 shops. Can you recommend anyone to ask? And someone at the end of the phone said, well, you could try Hugh Lipscomb. At the time, he had about 32 shops or something. So he said, give Hugh a ring. So I gave Hugh a ring. And I said, Pete, Hugh, you don't know me. I'm just a simple guy from Cornwall that's got this idea of opening a second shop. And someone said you'd be a good man to talk to. And he said, come up, fly up. So I flew from Newquay to Stansted. There was a flight in those days. He picked me up, whizzed me round, went to about 3 or 4 of his shops, had an hour with his financial manager, how it all managed and this and that. And then my flight back was about 2:30. And on the way back to the airport, he just slides me all their training manuals and says, Pete, I've got no intention of opening in Cornwall. Here's something to read on the plane. it could be very easy to batten down the hatches. We got 40 shops and but how they have been over the last few weeks, and I know working a lot with Andrew Crook to share information has been amazing.
I think ultimately you judge people by what they do when they don't have to do it. And these guys helped a lot when they didn't have to. It wasn't their job to say, here, try this, here, try that.
No.
And yet they supplied everyone with as much help as what they needed. And I guess that people that was local to them would have probably benefited from that also. I take my hat off to them. And I think James is, I don't know Hugh as much, but I think I've spoke to James a few times, and he's a particularly strong leader. And I think he's clearly a great manager of people. And I think Paul is the same. And I've chatted to Paul, I've chatted to Wayne. They all seem like they've got this great ethos, this great, I don't know how to explain it, but it's almost like they've all took instruction from the top. It's embedded into them. And that obviously probably would have come from Hugh as well. Like, you can tell, like, there is a lot of generosity there, I think, for definite. So one of the two things that I wanted to ask about, the sort of how you implemented what you did it give you confidence that if people are willing to spend more on deliveries the old way, that they would do moving it over to taxis? And do you think the taxi firms would be happy to carry on with this, like post-COVID?
Yes. We've had some lovely feedback from the taxi companies that sort of appreciate our professionalism. They said normally we're waiting outside other establishments, and the taxi drivers could be hanging around waiting for 20 minutes for the food to be finally. We can guarantee a sort of 2-3 minute slot, so they just pick it up and go. As soon as they send me an invoice, I pay it. Normally they have to wait over a month to get paid for corporate jobs. So I think we've done everything we can to just prove that we're nice guys to work with. And I think at a time when I remember chatting to the taxi owner, and he said in a normal month, or was it a week? No, in a normal week, his taxi company had 3,000 jobs. And then COVID hit, and they went down to about 400, he said. And so there were a lot of taxi drivers sat around, and a lot of them had sort of missed out on furlough and things. So both towns, the taxi companies were very grateful that we were up and operating. And and I was using the procedures that our friends up in Essex were very kind to share.
Taxi drivers probably spend a lot of time in normal employment without COVID waiting for a job to come in, just sitting there in a taxi rank. Whereas if they do, let's say, 3 orders, as in 3 customers per hour, well, if they can slot in a couple of Harbour Lights orders in between, happy days. They're making a bit of money, but it's just them not sitting there doing nothing waiting.
Yes, most definitely. I mean, we have in recent weeks started to open for walk-in customers, and that is sort of grown considerably. So what's the date today? Are we on the 30th of June? 30th. If anyone's listening. So on the 30th of June, from being 100%, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, 100% online ordering, it's now about 60% online ordering and 40% walk-in. I think our biggest problem is going to be crowd control. We are a highly seasonal business. Our take in August is 4 or 5 times what it is in January or February. So rugby scrums do develop. I think my biggest challenges at the moment is who can I get to be a marshaller outside my shop? Who's going to be brave enough to put the visor on and the surcoat and control the crowds in August?
I actually think you'd be good at it.
Dressed as a cod, or?
Well, yeah, it's your favourite suit. You tell me. How do you see things like post-COVID? Like, are you seeing a decline in cash usage at the moment?
I was having a long chat with our mutual friend Fred a couple of days ago, Yeah, cash. If I could say that 20 years ago, when I bought the Harbour Lights, I sort of made the decision I didn't want a job, I wanted a business. And I had 4 young kids, and I didn't want to be counting the tills on a Sunday night or whatever. So I wanted to train the gang to do the tills, and I realised that I had to pay a straight bat. So I needed to make my business profitable so that I could do things totally right. That's been the case because I didn't want to expose myself. I didn't want to do anything wrong. I don't mind doing things wrong, but handling money, it just didn't work because I wanted to create a business that wasn't totally reliant on Peter Fraser being there. So the move to cards and away from cash, I totally embrace, because over the years I've been gradually getting rid of all the jobs that I find boring, and doing the banking once a week or twice a week, I used to find really dull. And it's just so nice not having to count cash any longer. The amount they charged to bank the cash was like ridiculous. I mean, at the height of the season, I'd hand over a swag bag with 20 grand in, let's say, of cash. Yeah. And the guy would say, "Oh, thanks very much," and charge me. What would he charge me?
£8 a thousand or something? Or
yeah, it was. Yeah, but it was just what? So I'm giving you my money, and you're charging me to take that money. Oh, so I haven't worked it out yet, but I think we probably will be better off, and certainly the teams are more productive. That, you know, the shift manager not having to count tills and things like that at the end of the night. It means that they can get out the shops a lot quicker. I think the temptation for us to go card only will be quite strong.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I wouldn't put any resistance up to it at all, because it's quite a rare person that only operates cash only these days as a customer.
I was going to say, for you guys, where volume is key, or at least speed and efficiency, volume. You know, when someone's taking out a £20 note, looking at the menu, looking at the hand, looking at the till, then given that the staff have to think, "Oh, what change do they need?" and then it's giving back change. Whereas a quick tap on or a swipe, you think they're gone, they're out of your way, you know. Yeah. And I think, and I think there is added benefits to sort of credit card usage as well. People will spend a little bit more, especially if they're away in Cornwall, for argument's sake. One thing that's intrigued me, you know, you're very good at marketing. You know how to market a business well. You could tell by your branding, the look of the business, the way you promote it. How does someone manage to get not one, but 2 members of the royal family associated with their business at some point? How do you do that?
Bit of luck. Part of my marketing plan has been, for the last 12 years or so, to enter various of the Fish and Chip Shop of the Year awards. It's done tremendous good for my business. It's really each year geared the team up to really go for it. I haven't been as brave as I should have been. Perhaps I should have entered the main competition 10 or 12 years ago and just stayed in it until hopefully we'll be lucky. But I've been sort of playing at it. But there was the first Royal visit came out of, I was lucky enough. I just really love sustainability. I remember when I got rid of my partner, I bought out my partner 5 years in, so 15 years ago. We were best mates in the Navy, and best mates in the Navy aren't necessarily the best partners. We were very bad at telling each other what we needed to hear. So as soon as we broke up, and I bought him out, I just really wanted to really focus in on some key things, and one was the environment. I remember picking up the phone in 2005 and just phoning a few people, Sea Fish, and a few. I said I want to know everything about sustainable fish. Well, who do I need to speak to? There wasn't too many people to speak to 15 years ago. So that was sort of a bit, this is weird, but it was also quite exciting. That I thought, I think we could be at the front of the pack here. So as soon as a Good Catch award flashed up. I thought, cool, that would be a nice one to win. It took 3 years. On the third attempt, we got it, and that was great. And how we got it was, you talk about marketing. We're in the south, so cod is by far our biggest seller. So I decided to take cod off the menu for a week. We did a cod-free week. Did some lovely PR shots of someone dressed as a cod, a taxi pulling up outside our fish and chip shop with a suitcase and the cod, and a suitcase waved goodbye to the staff, and off they went for a week. Cod was off the menu. We reduced the price of other fish to try and get people to. It wasn't an anti-cod move. It was like a real simple message of sustainability: is the Brits need to be braver and try more species of fish. So it wasn't, all the messages was we use very sustainable sources of cod, but come on, guys. Let's give the poor cod a break for a week.
What other species did you try?
Pollock, whiting, Cornish hake is my favourite fish. It's just amazing. Megrim sole. So there was lots of varieties of fish. Our sales were up about 30 or 40% on an average week because everyone wanted to pick up the story. We ended up having half a page of the Sunday Times about us when we had a cod-free week, with a big picture of a celebrity chef holding up a cod. That Hugh Fernie Whittingstall holding up a big cod. The whole story was about us. And it was like, why is he? But it was great. It was great publicity. Anyway, we were lucky enough third time round to win the Good Catch Award. And a couple of months into that, I got a phone call. Sorry, this is a long story, Stills. I got a phone call and a lady phoned up. Hello, I'm an aide for Prince Charles. He's got an hour and a half free in his diary up in Edinburgh in 9 weeks' time. And he wonders whether you would be kind enough to go and brief him on what the fish and chip industry is doing about sustainability. And I said, oh, thank you very much. I'd love to. I got on the phone. I just, after sort of going for a quiet beer and thinking, this is all right. And it was all expenses paid. But I got on the phone to NFFF. Smales and Fastnet were there. And the young friars were there. So Zoe was there. And we met up in a research vessel in Edinburgh Harbour. And we had over an hour with Prince Charles, and Zoe got some lovely pictures of him teaching him how to cook fish and chips. And we had a nice chat. So that was good. So that moved on. And then we were lucky enough to win Restaurant of the Year about 3 years ago. I then thought, how can we make the most of this? And then I thought, I was doing some brainstorming over a pint, and I thought, I think we need a royal visit. So how do you get a royal visit? I investigated, and it was just, you asked for one. So every county has a Lord Lieutenant, and the Lord Lieutenant is a ceremonial role, and they have a PA, and they coordinate royal visits to all the counties. So I wrote a nice letter saying, hello, we've been lucky enough to be crowned the best fish and chip restaurant in the UK. Would there be any chance of a royal visit? And they acknowledged the letter, and all went quiet for a couple of months. And then the phone went again. Hello, Peter. Sophie Wessex, Countess of Wessex. Sophie Wessex is in the area. Would there be any chance of her popping in for lunch? I mean, she, whether you love or hate the royals, Sophie Wessex is a beautiful lady, a very hard-working royal, and she came in for lunch. We do workshops for primary school kids, finding out about how to protect the seas. So we flashed up one of those, and she attended that for 10 minutes. Then met everyone that had helped me along the route, and then she sat down for lunch, and she was with us for an hour and a half. Her favourite was Cornish mackerel. She tried 4 or 5 fish, and we just sat down and had an amazing lunch and got some nice photos. And all it took was a letter to the Lord Lieutenant. So I when I do bump into people, and I don't think you have to win a national award. I'm just thinking what else could be a cue, and it might be, I don't know, a fish and chip shop celebrating 30 years in business, 25 years, or just moved on. I don't know. The 4th generation shop or something. But not everyone's a royalist, but it was just a really nice thing. And I think our staff really enjoyed the day as well.
For them to come to your site, to your outlet, let's say your restaurant, I think you're downplaying yourself a little bit here. And I do think it'll be harder for others to get royal family to their shop, to their restaurant. And I think because one thing that you're discounting is that you've now built up 20 odd years of ethos of sustainability, of trying to sort of be at the forefront of something. I think that's really important. And I think if you haven't got ethics, let's say, or morals, or whatever it is that you want to call them, then it's going to be harder to get people like that through the door. Whereas a quick Google search, and I will find that Harbour Lights really does try and do things the right way.
Well, no, thank you very much, Stels. But I agree and I disagree. I think the royal family have had a lot of kicking lately. I think anyone in that position, if you notice, there's a lot of pictures of royalty pulling pints in a pub. And there are some other fish and chip shops that they visit. I definitely, that connection with the people is really important. And I don't think there is a much bigger, fish and chip shops is so much part of the local community. So, it may be not a sort of high profile shop, but it may be just a village shop, popping in and having some fish and chips is really good PR for the royal family as well. I mean, everyone helps each other out. I know COVID sort of put a halt on things, but they really do charge around the country a lot. If you did plot where they all go, and there may be a half an hour. Oh, we're passing that shop. Shall we pop in there? And so it may not be an hour and a half coming in for lunch, but if you don't ask, you don't get. So
exactly. How do you manage to sort of, you sit down over a pint, obviously, you sit down, you figure out what your mission is, you figure out what your ethos is, what's important to you. How do you then get the whole team rallying behind that vision?
I jump around a lot. Probably Sue would say I'm not a passionate person, but in front of the gang, I do leap up and down a lot. And when I was allowed to hug people, I am a big hugger. Yeah, I'm permanently looking for best practice, and you've got to be engaged. And I did work out quite early on that fish and chips is a sort of magical food. It does have the ability to cheer up the most miserable of souls. And so I just think we got a load of responsibility. I mean, I think last year we had about 180,000 people came through our doors. We would have filled Wembley Stadium twice. So, I mean, that's a little bit of responsibility, but it's also an amazing opportunity to cheer the world up a bit. People may sort of start to switch off now, but Peter Fraser firmly believes that the fish and chip industry has a great opportunity to cheer the world up, because fish and chips is quite a special product. And so when I'm on my feet chatting to the teams, I'm saying exactly that. And our sort of mission statement, or our purpose, is not to serve great fish and chips. It is to cheer the world up. I want the Harbour Lights and Frasers to pump happiness out into the world. And, we because we are a fish and chip shop, we're doing it through the medium of fish and chips. But, we could be someone, a different type of business. But so I'm leaping around saying, "Oi, shall we cheer the world up? It's such a miserable place." you've done podcasts with plenty of fish and chip owners. Have you done any with general managers that have to work for idiots like me?
No, not yet. I'm sure we could. I'm sure we could collect a big group of them. To be honest, I think the
because
biggest
yeah, no, I do feel sorry for my general managers and anyone else, because I do come up with some harebrained. I do most of them. I think actually not in the pubs though. I'm in the shower for about a minute and a half each morning. I don't come out the shower in the morning until I've worked out something wacky that I could do in that day. So the shower is my thinking time in the morning, and then my team have to. Luckily, I think I've got good relationship with them, and over the years I've taught them.
Talking about the team, then how do you what's been the biggest help to you over the years with what's given you the most advice to deal with people? Because obviously they're great managers, but you're a great manager too, and that's filtered down. But I guess there was a time when maybe you weren't so good, or maybe you always were. Maybe that's a talent you've had. But what would you say has helped you the most?
Learning to be honest, probably. I'm not someone that naturally enjoys conflict. I do tend to run a mile from conflict, and I think because of that, I probably wasn't honest enough with members of the team that things were probably going wrong, and I'd brush things under the carpet as opposed to addressing it. I think the beauty of sort of getting a bit older. When I started off, I was 40-ish, and the average age of the crew was about 22 odd. Now I'm 60 odd, and the average age of the crew is about 22 odd. So they haven't changed. I have. I think with it has just become a bit more maturity and confidence. And I think 20 years ago, if I had been more honest, I would have cut off a lot of earlier problems. As long as you talk to people professionally and on a one-to-one basis out of earshot of others, honesty is a great way, and people really respect you for it more. Life is getting quite precious for me at the moment, and I just don't want to waste it by being a softie and not opening my mouth.
Over the years, you said now you're in your 60s. That was you, not me, because you don't look a day over 40 in my view. So you're 20 years in. What would you say? What makes you get up every day and go to work? Do you still have that same motivation? Are you really?
Even more, and that's why I get really sad when I love chatting to fish and chip shop owners. When I bump into those that are sort of beginning to lose their mojo, their love for the business, they're just getting ground down and they just work long hours and maybe haven't gone through the discipline. They haven't gone through the procedure of putting systems in place and trusting people and stepping back. They're getting tired and their mojo's down. So that makes me quite sad. For me personally, I've gone through a process of shedding myself of every task that I don't enjoy doing at work, and finding someone, training someone up and delegating it to them. And so I did a really quite expensive course for business owners and called Strategic Coach. I think about 4 or 5 years ago, it was about £4,500. And I used to go up to London, and it was all about running a self-managing business. How do you run a business that you don't have to work in successfully? And I was picking up lots of tips. And one of them was one of the first one was work out what they call unique ability is. What are you good at, and what do you really enjoy doing? And just base your business, your time in the business around that. So whenever I'm in the business, I'm doing things that I really enjoy, which is coaching my managers, thinking out wacky marketing ideas, on the floor chatting to customers or whatever. So that makes me happy, and that's all I do. So when I do come into my shops, I bounce in, and I do, hey, and I get quite noisy, and I'm really happy. So I think the secret for me is, yeah, you've got to do that. You've got to sort of audit everything that you do. So if you're an owner, I would guess that there are probably about 80, 90, 100 different tasks you do in a month for your business. And just which ones of those do you enjoy doing, which don't? For me, right down the bottom was DIY and maintenance. I haven't got a clue. Put a paintbrush in my hand, I start crying. I can put a plug on a kettle. That is about it. And I just, but for years, Pete, this is broken. What do you think? And I'll be like, trying so far out of my unique ability, totally miserable, hadn't got a clue. Yet I was the person trying to fix things that have been broken or whatever. So, yeah, that's for owners that I don't want to. It's work for me, and everyone is different. There are some people that just want to work; they just want to be there all the time, and we're all wired differently. For me, that's work for me. I just wanted a business, and I found a way to really enjoy it.
In the last 20 years or so, what would you say has probably changed in the business, whether locally or nationally, in your view?
Time for a funny story, I think, Stels. I just bought the business, and there was a bit of an overlap. I was still in the Navy for about 6 months, and lovely lady Connie's my manageress at Harbour Lights, and I'm in my office in the Navy, and she said, Pete, she phones me up, Pete, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. And I said, oh no, Connie, what's the problem? She said, there's been a bit of an issue. And I said, oh, what's that? She said, a lovely pregnant lady, heavily pregnant lady came in our takeaway. And I said, yes, Connie, tell me more. And she was with a friend, and she ordered, they had 2 small haddock, and she was telling me exactly what they had ordered. Totally irrelevant, but it's just the lovely way that she was. And I said, yeah, okay, what happened next, Connie? She said, you wouldn't believe it. She said that the cover from the fluorescent tube light above her head fell off. And it fell 6 foot onto the pregnant lady's top of her head, cracked in half, and she went down to the floor like a sack of spuds. And I went, crikey, Connie. She said, no problem at all. We didn't charge them for their 2 cold haddock chips, whatever. I got a taxi, and I've got her address, and I've arranged for some flowers to be sent to her. Everything's fine. And I went, wow. Now, let's roll that on 20 years. No blame, no claim, or whatever the expression is. And there's a pregnant lady in a takeaway, and a fluorescent tube cover lands on the top of her head, and she goes down to the floor. And this was all resolved with a taxi service, a taxi ride home, and a bunch of flowers. And we heard nothing more. In fact, she wrote a letter thanking us for everything. So I do get a bit sentimental. I do. Life was so much simpler 20 years ago.
I suppose in some ways, in today's world, that would be, like you say, lots of complaining, social media, negative reviews. Well, and this is assuming that, the person that obviously had that experience then was a decent person. But highly likely that in today's world, that would be bad reviews and so on and so on.
Yeah.
Probably even make the local news.
Yeah. So things have got a little trickier. I mean, when I started, pubs didn't sell food. I'm surrounded by pubs, and the fish and chip did really good trade because pubs didn't do food. Now, competition is vast. So I think we've had to reinvent ourselves all the time. And it was when sort of Rick Stein opened a chip shop 200 yards from our front door. Pete, you're in trouble now. And it was the best thing that could have ever happened to us. It sort of woke me up from a slumber And I thought, right, I need to compete now. If anything, it was really good news because his prices were quite expensive, and we could put 50p up on our fish and chips on takeaway and still be the good guy. So I was very grateful when he came into town.
You're quite smart. What are your thoughts on government stimulation? What could the government do post-COVID? And, if they want to take a longer, deeper look at the industry, what would you like to see done?
I think that could be a real crucial one. It would really help. I forget exactly which year it was when it dropped down from 17.5 to 15.
2008.
2008. Good on you, Stels. So that was a lovely boost. That really helped. The country is on its knees. I've got a friend that I was at university with that's worked up in finance in the city, and I do need to ask him because I don't understand. I mean, the country's spending money. Oh, it's going to be dire for the next few years, but all they've done is printed money. So I would like to work out how that all affects us. Why is that a problem? And then they talk about, well, they'll ramp up inflation, and then all their debts won't be quite so much. And it was like, oh, right, okay. So you've got a lot to be whizzing around your head. The thing that's reassuring me is that fish and chips sort of do quite well when the economy is wobbling. It was that 2008 wobble that sort of started off, and people would just move. They still wanted to go out, so they weren't going to fine dining restaurants. They were, I hate to use the word downgrade. Chatting to other owners, it's a similar tale. So actually sort of increased quite nicely during that recession. So
when you say that VAT dropped, that 2.5% was a big help, was it a big help because you dropped 2.5% and took in a bit more sales? Or was it a help because you left it and you recouped a couple of percent margin? What was the help?
Recouping the margin.
Yeah.
Margin to me has never been more important because both my shops have got restaurants. I've taken the decision not to open the restaurants. So we're just relying on takeaways, and I'm used to gross profits. Gross margins are 10% higher in the restaurant than the takeaway. So I'm having to totally rethink how I do things. But the benefits on productivity on running takeaway only have been vast. So
what sort of GP would you aim for out of the takeaway, if you don't mind me asking?
I would like to introduce people to the thought of prime cost.
Mm-hmm.
So prime cost is the cost of goods. So all your food, drink, and packaging, and all your labour costs. Parcel those all together as prime cost. The North Americans love prime cost, and I adopted prime cost as a way to sort of look at things about 5 years ago. And if you add all those together, the sort of real Shangri-La is if you can get your prime cost down to 55%, you're going to have a big smile on your face. You're going to have a great business. 60%, yeah, you're doing okay. 65, yeah, you're bouncing along. 70, if you hit 70, you're in what they call the danger zone, and the longevity of your business is not good. So for me, I'm just permanently looking at prime costs. I have not achieved 55 yet.
Okay.
I bounce around 60, 61, but I've got plans to try and improve to 55. And bouncing around 60, 61, 62 means that I don't have to. I have a reasonable lifestyle. I don't have to work in the business full time, and everything. Yeah, it's a nicely profitable business.
So let me throw you a hypothetical. The government, let's say they'd reduce VAT by 2.5%. It's fair to say you probably won't do anything. You're not going to mess with your menu. That would really help your prime costs if they was to do that. If they was to drop, let's say they went in and did a whole tear apart the VAT system, and they, let's say, drop it to 10%. Maybe it's something they can do post Brexit, because I've been told they can't do it before that.
Yeah.
If there was to go to, let's say, 10%, what do you see yourself doing? Absorbing it all, or would you actually drop it?
Oh no, I would. I think the pub, if 2.5%, I think they'd forgive you. I think if that dropped 10%, I think your locals would expect to see a bit. My dad left his local pub when the landlord, I think the chancellor, put two old pennies on a pint or something, and it was due to come in a week's time, and his landlord warmed the bell and put the price of the beer up by 2 old pennies, and the pub emptied and everyone went to the pub up the road, and it took him a month to recover. So no, you've got to we're sort of in this together, and without loyal customers we're all screwed anyway. So so you can't take the Michael. No.
One last thing I want to talk about, and then I'm going to let you go. 20 years in, you're 60 years old. You've always taken help from others and given help. But, you know, what a lot of people probably don't know is that there's 3 things that you've sort of done, which put a stamp on the industry, in my view. One is the International Mushy Pea Day, which in fairness should only be a National Mushy Pea Day, because I don't know if anybody knows what a mushy pea is outside of England. But well done.
Yeah, no, they do. They do.
On,
Australia. Well, no, I got involved with Falkland Islands, a salt and battery, a shop in New York. We're very keen. Yeah. Chumley's in Australia. I mean, Australia, they munch away at mushy peas. So it was International Mushy Pea Day.
Okay.
And I funded it. It did take quite a few £1,000s to launch it and do it properly. And so this is a bit of a shout out to the industry. If anyone's got any marketing budgets, we ran it for 2 years. Last year, we asked out to the industry but didn't get the financial support, and so we just did a bit of an in-house International Mushy Pea Day. So it was a lot of fun. Year 2, I was up in London leaping around in green tights with placards outside the Houses of Commons.
But that wasn't International Mushy Pea Day, was it? That was just like a normal day, wasn't it?
No, it was. I would love to have got into amateur dramatics, but having 4 kids, they took my time. But no, International Mushy Pea Day is there. If the industry wants it to stay there, then it's great. Could just probably do with a little bit of finance.
Yeah, we'd love to help you somewhere. You know, we have we have a product in our product range that's synergistic. You know, it's the mushy pea seasoning is there to help people make great mushy peas. So if there's any way we can, sort of help you, I think I've mentioned this offline before anyway. So, you just hit me up and let's see if we can do anything. And then obviously you do a lot of mentoring. You help a lot of sort of fish and chip shop owners across the country. I've seen your name pop up a few times over Facebook where people have said, "Oh, Pete, help me." Give us a little bit about that. Who can get in touch with you if they wanted to ask anything?
Well, anyway, I don't know. I think maybe to owners that are in the early days of their shop, they chat with me. They crikey, that might help me along the way. So when we went into lockdown, I just thought, what could I do? So I did a little video of me leaping around, just offering my services if anyone wanted to get in contact. And it was about 8 shop owners contacted me, and we had an hour chat, and I sort of wrote up notes and sent them some ideas, and I need to follow up on all of those. And it was heartwarming, because I just take it back to this Dave Hutchinson that gave me so much time when I started off, and all my friends in the industry now, Fred, Richard, South Shields, and everyone else. Sorry if I haven't mentioned you. It's it's time to give. I have spare time. So I love chatting fish and chips, and it may be that I can help people connect with some new ideas or not. The offer is permanently there. So Pete, if anyone sends me an email to pete@harbourlights.co.uk, let's hook up. I'd love to chat with you.
And are we allowed to talk about Beneath the Batter, the book that you have?
Beneath the Batter. Well, no, I feel guilty now. Okay,
why?
So, well, no, because the project's taking so long. So about 18 months ago, I thought, oh, right, again, I was coming up to 60, so it's time to give back. So I thought, let's write a book. And Mark Petru wrote a lovely fish and chip book. Stel, you're good with dates. What year would that be?
Oh, blimey. It must be again around
10 years?
About 2007, 12? 2008, I'd say.
Right. So if anyone doesn't know, Mark's a wonderful guy. And he wrote a great book. But I came up with this idea of Beneath the Batter, all the sort of side stories of the fish and chip industry. And I don't mind doing a little bit of writing, but I thought, give it more legs. Why don't I ask 30, 40, 50 different people to write articles on different aspects of the fish and chip industry? And I'd just sort of compile it together. And I'm not after any money for it. So all the proceeds are going to the Fisherman's Mission. And so I got hold of the Fisherman's Mission, and I said, who would be a good person to write the foreword for this? And so 2 Michelin star Nathan Outlaw is a great supporter of the Fisherman's Mission. So they phoned up Nathan, and Nathan said, yeah. Within 10 days, I had a foreword from him, all about his personal experiences, his granddad in Kent, and his early memories of fish and chips. And I thought, I better get this project going now. And so, yes, if you've been kind enough to donate an article, thank you very much. I'm sorry I've had to bombard you with lots of reminders.
I'd like to apologise for the delay. For the delay that probably caused your delay, which, because my article was, I would say, profoundly late, as per Stelios.
But it was worth it. The quality of it. You are a natural orator, writer. The words. I'm going
to roll over.
Well, no, people. No. It was very good quality, and so the pressure is on. So there are just 2 or 3 more that I need to get a baseball bat out for the last time and say, come on. Yep. And then I need to I was lucky enough to find a publisher called Arcbound who are going to put it all together, based up in Glasgow. And if fingers crossed, might get it out for Christmas. But there's still a little bit more work to do. I'm dedicating a day a week to it until the project's finished, and I'm handing it over to the publisher at the moment. And yeah, hopefully it will be a good read with lots of different characters in, all the different sort of side stories around our amazing industry.
Talking of books, this is the last thing, I promise. What book would you recommend, whether it's 1, 2 or 3 books, to help people with managing their business, managing staff, and so on?
I'm doing a series of book reviews for the Fish Fries Review at the moment. I think I'm on number 4 or 5 at the moment. Number 4, I think. One that I haven't recommended that is a beautiful book is You May Be in Love with Your Business like I am, or you may not, but it probably could be in better shot. And there's a really good book called Built to Sell. And Built to Sell is basically saying, right, if you wanted to put your business on the market in 18 months' time, what shape would it have to be in for you to get the best possible price for it? And it runs through everything from your team to your systems to your finances to absolutely everything. And so you get a timetable and you work to put your business on the market in 18 months. And funny old thing, in 18 months' time, your business you're in love with it even more because it's in even better shape than it was. And you decide to sell it to yourself. So I think Built to Sell would be probably the book for business owners. I think it would be a good book to read.
Fantastic. Well, Pete, I just want to say thanks for being a great guest. Thanks for your time, your generosity. Thank you for, being such a great help in the industry as well. And and also thank you for those Cornish pasties when I came down there that time. Never let me leave empty-handed.
Stells, I officially live at the end of the world. If anyone is kind enough to come down all the way to Cornwall, the least I could do is give them a box of pasties.
You did ruin my low carb diet that week. You do know that.
No, thank you. I'd stumbled on this industry totally by accident 20 years ago, and I'm just so grateful that I did.
Fantastic.
And thank you for everything you do. I love your podcast, Driving Around. And there is so much variety. The only thing I would say, grab a general manager that has to deal with bozo shop owners like myself.
I think after this,
let's hear their perspective.
I think after this, there's going to be a queue of them. All right, Pete. Well, thanks for your time, mate.